Hi, and welcome to Rolling Hills Library. We're so glad you're with us. We want to get started right away. So Ms. Cindy Wells is with us here. She is the Field Specialist in 4-H Youth Development through the Missouri University Extension Office. So Cindy, so glad to have you here today. We know that
Thank you for having me, Anali.
You bring so much energy and education to us, so we're glad for that. We want her to get started right away. So Cindy, could you please tell us a little bit what you do in your job? And then the time is yours to help us through this Plant Something New program.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I am Cindy Wells, as Anali said. I am the Youth Development Specialist, which means I work with kids, which I've been in education for over 20 years, and I love working with youth. One thing I really like about 4-H, and one reason I joined the 4-H crew, the extension crew, I guess, is we have lots of projects for youth so they can actually do something that interests them. But through those projects and through the 4-H club structure, we teach leadership skills and life skills to these youth. And that's something that stays with them for a lifetime, regardless of what they do after high school and as they move on. When they're in 4-H, it's been shown that they are 4 times more likely to go on to higher ed, and they're, I think, 60% less likely to go into bad behaviors, risky behaviors and things. So 4-H does a lot of teaching. I call it sneaky learning as a teacher. You get to work with, for example, we're going to do gardening today, but throughout this project, you're going to see some sneaky learning. There's going to be some public speaking going on because the youth are going to have to share. There's lots of different things that can be taught through project learning, so they get to do things they want. So I work with the youth in Buchanan and Andrew County, and I love working with all youth, not just 4-H youth. So I'm glad to be able to share with kids outside my 4-H realm today. Thank you. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot of stuff going on today, and hopefully I can get done in my hour. So because I tend to like to talk, and I'll try to keep that to a minimum. But please ask questions throughout, and Anali has my contact information. I also share it before I get off here. So if you have any questions and want to call or email or whatever we can do, we can help with that, because we're going to kind of do the basics, and I'm going to share some resources. A lot of what I'm going to share today, I didn't do a PowerPoint because there's lots of stuff out on the web, and I thought I'd just share those links with you to demonstrate what I'm talking about, but then you can go back to those as well. And feel free to follow up with Anali or email me, because I'll give my email here in a bit, and I can email you those resources and any other information that you need. So again, ask questions as we go. This is not you have to wait to the end and ask a question about something I talked about at the very beginning. So just if you have something, excuse me, to add, please do that. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is, if you get your packet out, there were some handouts in your bag. And we're looking for this handout. It is, this is the planning calendar for transplant. Can you find that in your handouts?
Okay.
You find it? Okay. I am going to now go to a website and also share. This is a way for you to kind of keep track, if you will, because the spring frost date is very important. Sometimes, as you can see, we can plant before the last frost date. Sometimes it has to be after. So we need to, this is actually planting seeds for transplants, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to show you a calendar right now, and then we're going to talk about this in more detail here in just a few minutes. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is Missouri. It's actually a map from MU Extension, and it's the Frost Freeze Probabilities Guide. Now, this is not a promise that it's not going to frost in our area after April 27th, but there's a good probability it won't. So this is kind of the guideline that people use when they're talking about their transplant and wanting to make sure to not put those out in the garden until after the last frost. One of the reasons is transplants, especially plants such as tomatoes, which are very tender, if you put those out and they get a frost, a lot of times it will kill them, or if it doesn't, it stunts them and which means they won't grow very well. So it's better if you're going to plant tomatoes, and we're kind of a right in through here probably. So it looks like we shouldn't plant tomatoes till about April 27th, which, to be quite honest, is coming up quicker than you realize. Some people actually, the old timers, if you will, an old wives' tale is you shouldn't plant tomatoes till Mother's Day, which is in May. So that's also another guideline that some people have. My own personal experience, when I try to rush the tomatoes and I cover them and do all that stuff, and then I'll end up putting some later tomatoes out. Actually, the later tomatoes with the heat actually catch up to the ones I put out earlier that have fought the cold and haven't grown as well. So I'm trying this year not to get in a hurry, but I know I probably will. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. So what you need to do as we talk about transplant is kind of look up the last spring frost date. And if you're wanting to plant cucumbers, melons, and sweet potatoes, you need to start those 3 weeks before that date. If you want to do tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, head lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, 8 weeks before the last frost date, you should have started those seeds. Now, as you know, that's going to be kind of rushing it. Tomatoes, you can still plant from seeds and just not plant till closer to Mother's Day. You can still get your 8 weeks in. And then 12 weeks, if you really wanted to grow celery, different herbs, or your, I can't even read it, sweet onions. Oh, sweet onions from seed. Yes, I've never tried that. You should have started those 12 weeks ago. So basically 3 months before you're going to plant them, which is the last frost date, you would need to start those seeds. Any questions about that right now? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move ahead because I want to talk about something that's very important, especially for beginning gardeners, and that is a seed packet. Seed packets, and you should have some in your drawstring bag. I'm showing the bean, the garden bean. This one has lots of information, and notice there's a front. There's also a back, and we may have some trouble reading this. Yeah, the glare is not going to let us do that. But we will make it work because I have some stuff online that I'm going to show you about the seed packet. So locate a seed packet. You should have, I believe you have a Morning Glory one, and maybe a radish. I can't remember what all I threw in the bag, but I think you have a radish one. So pick up one of the seed packets, and I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm taking you to a site that says how to read seed packets. Seed packets probably give you more information in the shortest amount of time when you're actually looking to purchase seeds. Now keep in mind, and I don't know that we'll get to this today, depending on time, I'm watching my time, so we'll see, but we may get to this next time. Some seeds are actually better planted directly in your garden or your raised beds. Some are better started from seed and then transplanted as an actual plant. And we'll talk about that more probably next time, but I wanted to go through the seed packet. And it says here, it's more than just a pretty envelope, and it is. To read seed packets, first thing you need to do, you have to read some of the fine print, but we're going to get to the main information that you can see right off. The first thing you're going to see is the plant information. So the picture, a lot of times you'll see the picture. If you look at these here on my screen, you can see pictures of different peppers. You can see pictures of different pumpkins. You can see the radish, and that's actually the Champions, the kind I think I threw in most bags. Some got the white ones. But you can see the pictures, and this is what the finished product looks like. Now, something I wanted to mention, if you're planting this out in your garden, and these radishes may not get this big, and they may not look this pretty. This is a perfect specimen that has been grown from seed, washed, obviously cleaned up, and then posed for a picture. So if yours don't look perfect like this, don't get upset. They're still going to be quite tasty and able to be eaten. Okay, we're going to get on down and talk more about the plant name. That is on the front. Usually it will say, for example, my one that I just picked up said Radish Champion. The Morning Glory said Giant Mixed Colors. And that information is found right above the picture there. It also will give the scientific name many times. For example, on the screen, you see we have a zinnia packet. It tells me it's a giant cactus double mix, but then it gives a scientific name. So if you're really doing some research on a specific specimen or specific type of plant you want to grow, that scientific name may be helpful. Now, also on the back, if you look at the back of one of your seed packets, you're going to find a lot of other information. First of all, you're going to see a description of the plant or the product. So for example, if I look on the back of the radish package, it says Champion produces large 2-inch diameter radishes that don't become pithy. Pithy is a garden word for meaning they get kind of soft in the middle, not rotten soft, but they get kind of a dry feel to them, and they're not near as good to eat. It talks about the attractive color and that they're crisp and that they have tender flesh that make this quick growing radish perfect for a garden or greenhouse. And as you can see on my screen, it talks about zinnias, and it tells me which colors I'm going to have here, how big the blooms get. Notice it says 4 to 5 inches, so you could take your ruler or your fingers. Oh, so these flowers are going to get this big around. Notice it says it's one of the easiest annuals to grow, and notice it says attracts butterflies. That is so important with all the pollinator projects and trying to save the monarch butterflies and the other butterflies. So that really information that's good to have. It's outstanding in beds, so you can plant those in flower beds. You can plant them in borders. You can also plant these in containers. So as you can see, it's pretty broad as to what you can use this. One thing I always look for, because I sometimes, when it says one of the easiest annuals, that means it's easy to grow. So that helps me know that it won't take a lot of care and I won't have to, what I call baby the seed and the plants. It works out well. So that, another word to pay attention to is it says annual. Now, annuals mean that you have to plant these every year. So zinnias do not come back. Radishes are annuals. They don't come back. So every year, if you want zinnias, you're going to have to purchase a package of seed, go out and plant these zinnias and let them grow. Now, we also have something called perennials. Can you tell me, do you know what a perennial is, Sam?
A perennial is a plant that does come back every year.
Very good, very good. So look for that. If you want perennials, obviously they're easier to take care of in the fact that you don't have to plant them every year. For example, I have flower beds, and in that I have irises that are perennials. They come back every single year from a bulb. I also have coneflowers or echinacea. That comes back up from the root, and you can start that with seed. And I have lavender. Lavender is also a perennial, so it comes up every year, okay? You also have something called, in your Morning Glory packet, if you look at the back of it, it says a half-hardy annual. What that means is more than likely, if the conditions are right, it will seed itself back. And I can tell you with Morning Glories, and that's one of the seeds we're going to plant here in a little bit, they do seed themselves back. I planted some Morning Glories in my front flower bed to climb up a pole because Morning Glories vine, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I just planted 3 spots, 3 different groups of seeds. They grew, they went up my pole, but as the plants, the flowers go away, they form a seed pod. That seed pod dries, drops into the ground. Last year, I had to hoe and pull new little Morning Glories all over my rose bed because I planted them close to my rose bed. They spread like crazy. So keep in mind to be, if you want a place that Morning Glories can climb and come back year after year, they do seed themselves back, okay?
We had Morning Glories at our last house, and they did the same thing too. They went wild, man.
They do, and they're really good if you have some place, some side of the house or something that you want vines to continue to grow up every year. They're great that way, but in my rose bed, it didn't work out so well. I spent a lot of time getting rid of little plants. I did leave a few because I still like the fact they climb up the pole, But yeah, that's one thing, another little bit of research to do. When you're getting ready to plant something, especially perennials, research how it spreads. For example, I planted some what they called it chocolate mint, and it was a perennial and said it would come back. Great. So I planted it. That chocolate mint took over the whole basement wall. I had planted it up a wall to kind of cover a space, one spot, and it grew up, clear up the wall now. It definitely is what they call invasive. So look for that word. If you're getting ready to plant perennials or really any kind of vining plant especially, look it up and see if any of the information says something about invasive. If it is, then that's something you need to be cautious of. Okay, let's get back to our seed packet, and I'm just going to continue with the one we have here. Notice it has a tip here, withstands the summer heat, so it's easy to grow. So if you have hot summers, which we do here in Missouri, that's something to be aware of too. Now, this next little table is very important. So I don't know if you can see my mouse or on it, but I'm right here in this little table. This tells the type, and it will say annual or perennial, or it may say a half-hardy annual, which means it will seed itself back. It tells you how deep to plant it, and planting depth refers to, okay, I'm going to plant it outside. Here's my seed, and I need a 1/4 inch of soil on top of that. Or I need to push the seed down about just a 1/4 inch. That's not very far. Look at a ruler and see where a 1/4 inch is. So that means you don't want to plant that seed very deep. What happens if we plant the seeds very deeply is they will not sometimes come up, or it takes them a long time to come up. And so you need to be aware of that. Now, this thin too means that when you sprinkle the seeds, genius seeds are fairly small, as are some like radish seeds, and you need to sprinkle them very sparingly, but it's very hard to get them spaced out. So what's going to happen if they all produce, if they all are germinated and will go ahead and grow, you're going to put the row of zinnias that are very close together. So you may have 2 or 3 zinnias in one little spot. Well, what happens if you have them too thick is the plant will actually not grow and get as big as it should. It will kind of what I call choke each other out. So it fights for the nutrients from the soil. And if there's too many plants there, the soil may not have enough nutrients to get all those plants to grow. So what they're recommending on the seed packet is you pull every plant within 6 inches. So here's a zinnia, you go down about 6 inches and pull everything between those 6 inches. Now, I'm going to be quite honest, many times it really bothers me to pull up plants that are growing. So I may push that a little bit, and I may thin to every 3 inches or 4 inches. So I may not do the full 6 inches, but it's important to thin those plants because they do much better. And I know, like I said, it bothers me to pull up good plants that are growing, but it really makes it worth your while because your plants do much better. You can be told, especially flowers, to plant these in the sun or the shade. Most vegetable plants say sun. Some flowers like shade, and it will tell that on the packet. This one, zinnias, like sun. It tells you how tall this plant will get at its mature height. This one will get 2 to 3 foot tall. So you can kind of use your ruler and say, oh, this is going to be like a yardstick tall. That's 3 feet. So it's going to be fairly tall. In days of germination, this is how long, once you plant the seed in the ground, and make sure it has water, because that's a thing that's very important to get the seed to germinate. Within 5 to 10 days, you should see little plants growing out of the soil. So that is something to watch. If it goes 14 days, 21 days, that may be an indication your seed was not what they call germinated or didn't have good germination. So that means the seeds are actually kind of duds, if you will, and won't grow. Notice they recommend that this seed does a direct sow. That means you put it directly out in the ground. So they don't recommend you start zinnias inside, then transplant them. They recommend you go ahead and put those out in your flower beds, your gardens, those kinds of things. It says you can start indoors 3 to 4 weeks before last frost. But usually if you see direct sow, it might be a better thing to go ahead and put it out. Now, it tells you how long it blooms. So it's going to start blooming in the summer and will bloom clear through fall or probably the first frost. Okay. Another thing that's very important, and I'm going to tell you, some people throw away all their old seeds. So if you look, it's packed for the year 2016 in this example. Obviously, this is an older website. It should have the new date. So if you go to the store right now and look at seed packets and look at that, you should see pack for 2021. So that is the newest seed. It tells them to sell it by 10/2016. Most stores throw away their old seed. I actually have a relationship with a nursery here in St. Joe that they many times will give me their seed from last year. And what I found is, for the most part, that seed still grows very well. Instead of all 10 seeds I plant coming up, maybe just 8 seeds come up, but it's still, the germinations is still good enough to grow good plants. So that's a good, something I do every time, and I donate it back to the community gardens and stuff. I know our master gardeners here at my office, we have a group of master gardeners that have a big high tunnel. They, a lot of times, will get old seed donated, and that is actually what you have in some of your packages or your bag, is what the master gardeners donated. And you'll notice that some of that seed is old, but I can almost guarantee that it will go ahead and grow. Okay, any information or any questions about the seed packet? And it tells more about this a little bit. Here's another one. Notice this one says garden chives, and it gives the name for it. And notice it says perennial. Heirloom is another thing that's kind of neat. There's a lot more heirloom seeds than there used to be. Heirloom seeds are ones that have been around. Your heirloom tomatoes have a different flavor. Master gardeners about 5 years ago gave me some heirloom tomato plants, and I grew them. And those are my favorites now. They have a more true, I guess, tomato flavor that haven't been, now they do not produce as heavily. They are more, they are not drought resistant, so dry weather really bothers them, but they really are very good tasting. So here's another package. You can see kind of the same information, just presented in a different way. This chive likes full sun. It doesn't like being wet. Some people call it getting wet feet, and that means the water, the plant actually sits in water. They don't like that. They just like moisture. This one, you just put 1/8 of an inch deep. You space it out to 12 inches. And this one tells you how many days to harvest. So this one, from the time it comes up, now that's not when you plant it, it's when it comes up, it should take about 75 days for that to be harvested. Another thing many seed packets have on it now is a planting map. And this tells you, okay, find our state. So right here's where we're at, Missouri, kind of here in the middle, and we're green. So we go over and we should plant this plant out in the garden from April through June. Many times we can plant things late and have what they call a fall garden. So you could actually plant chives in June, and they would produce up to 75 days later. So it just wouldn't be ready for harvest as quickly, but it can be planted. So that's actually a pretty big time span. So you can plant different ones. I know radishes a lot of times. My grandma and grandpa loved radishes, and so they would plant radishes every 3 weeks. We started as soon as the ground could be worked, and every 3 weeks they'd go plant a few more radishes, so they had fresh radishes all summer long. Okay, you also will see the horticulture companies, especially the older companies. We'll talk about the heirloom plants. Here's another back of a package that's very close to what you see. Notice this says bush form, and we'll talk about that more when we get to our green bean seeds. But notice it tells you to sow in every soil in full sun after danger of frost, spring to early summer. So again, you can plant these for several different types of human, or for several different types of harvesting dates. Again, the seed packet has the same information. So any questions about seed packets and the information they include?
You'd really want to almost have like a garden diary, wouldn't you, to write down the dates of when you've started stuff and when you
Yes.
want to replant or whatever?
And it talked about that. Here's a garden journal, and I will make this link available because this is a pretty comprehensive link. And it talks about garden journals and what to put. But yes, it's a very good idea to put in, and I actually kind of draw a little map because I tend to plant lots of different tomatoes. And especially when I like to try new ones, so I may not be familiar with the brand. And so I actually keep a little chart. So this row of 12 tomatoes, this one is a Brandy Boy. This one is a black creme. This one is, that helps me because the tomatoes, some of them look the same, some look different, but my tags, and I always put the tags in beside the tomato that come with them, but sometimes those tags disappear. So that can be an issue. So I do make a little garden journal, and it's really good to say, I planted radishes on this day, and it's actually, especially if you want to garden, the garden journal is something you can look back on and say, okay, last year I planted tomatoes in April, but then I turned around and planted them again the last of May, and the plants ended up being about the same. So maybe I should hold off on planting and not try to, because I think it was last year I planted tomatoes early because I really wanted to get a jump start on it. I had to run out and cover them constantly. And once it frosted so hard that it actually got it even under the buckets I put over them. And those plants actually didn't do any better than the plants I planted in May and even the 1st of June. So I learned my lesson a little bit, and that is something to make sure and know. Other questions? Okay, I am going to stop my sharing. And we're going to, if there's no other questions about the seed packets, we're going to jump up to an activity. Now you should have a baggie, a paper towel, and I think there should be 2 or 3 bean seeds in them. Can you find the baggie and the paper towel with the bean seeds?
Yes.
Okay, let me share my screen again, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with these. I think it's a really cool activity. And there's 2 ways to do it, and I'm going to show you both. This is one way. Oops, let me get back up to the top of my screen. So what you do is, this is actually exploring germination. And, oh, my time's going very quickly. What you do, and they suggest you take your baggie, you would dampen your paper towel, spread it out, of course, and then they, as you can see here in the picture, hopefully you can see here in the picture, they put the staples across that. The reason you do that is you put the beans so they are above the staple, again, against this wet paper towel. And they suggest you tape the bag to a wall or window. What you need is close to a sunlight source. So the window obviously will give you that. If you have a wall that the sun comes in and hits, that would also be a place to put that. But this is what happens. Notice that the beans, right here is the staples, but notice the roots starting to grow. You keep those damp. And this is about 3 days after planting, because since it's in the house and it's warm, they germinate fairly quickly. A few days later, you see the green start to push out of the bean. You obviously have the top of the bag open and the bean starts pushing up. That's about 10 days. And then about 2 weeks, notice the true, what they call the true leaves. This is the beginning leaf. Here's the true leaf starting. And they just continue to grow and grow. You can leave those if you want and actually watch them continue to grow. It's kind of interesting, but this really gives you a good chance to see the germination process. And I'm gonna stop sharing and go to, let me get to the other one, because there's another way to do this. And let me show that one. If it's easier, you can also simply wet the paper towel, lay it in the bag, and watch them sprout and start to grow, laying flat. You notice the bean starts pushing the bag up. So that's one reason to use the window method. But if it doesn't work, notice how they grow. You can still see the germination process. So your bean sends out its root, sends its food out, and then it will start growing the actual plant. You can see some of the leaves starting right in the middle there. So that is what you need to do. That is what this bag and paper towel is for. Grow your beans, and we'll check next time. And I actually may get your information and follow up, because I'm anxious to see what you guys think. I think it's a pretty cool little experiment.
Yeah, that looks neat.
It's fun, and if you look at your handout, there's one that's called Seeds Up Close. Let me stop my share. So there's one that's called Seeds Up Close. This demonstrates the process. I keep forgetting about this crazy green screen. And the seed pictures down here. And you're able to label, because you have 3 pieces to begin with, and you'll be able to see all of these on that green bean bag. You're going to see the seed coat, which is obviously on the outside. You'll be able to see the cotyledon, which is actually the sprout. So that's right here. Whoops. So that's right here. And then you actually will see what they call the embryo, which is where the temporary food goes. And that's where the actual bean seed, as it splits open, you'll see the white part or the green part leave. That's the actual bean seed. And that's what gives the food to the plant while it grows. Okay, so that's a handout to look at that goes with your bean thing. Okay, questions about that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'm not going to take the time. I was going to take time and have the class kind of do it as a whole, but we've still got quite a bit to cover, and I just have like 15 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and move ahead if that's okay with you guys. Okay, we're actually going to talk about some recycle, reuse plant starting methods now. And if you find a bag with a, looks like a cut up egg carton in it, and it is a cut up paper egg carton. What we're going to do, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and you can decide to do it now or wait till later, whichever you prefer. But what you're going to do is you're going to take your egg carton out. As you can see, it's small. So you need to pick one of your smaller seeds. You could actually put a morning glory in here because their little plants are very small, or it would grow a couple radishes. Obviously, there's not enough room for the radish to grow, so I would actually suggest planting a morning glory, or what else will I give you? A pea seed would work in there. A zucchini would work in here, but the morning glory may work about best. But what you do is you fill this little cup with your soil and kind of pack it down a little bit. So you put your garden soil, your potting soil in here that they provided in your drawstring bag, pat it down, get 1 or 2 seeds. It just takes 1 or 2. I would almost suggest 2 just in case germination's not good. Put 2 seeds and look at the back of your package. So if you do choose morning glory, it says to plant it a 1/4 inch. So you would just simply push it in the soil, not very far, just a little bit of time, and then set this someplace because this will soak the water and could become damp, but water it and sprinkle it. Don't put it underneath the faucet and let the faucet wash the soil out because then your seed will be displaced. But just take and sprinkle some fine water over it till it starts, and you'll see the egg carton start to turn dark as it gets wet. And what you do is set this somewhere where the sun can get to it. You can even, to be quite honest, stick it back in a baggie and make kind of a little greenhouse that keeps it warmer. But as long as you're inside, you should be fine. But keep this damp. And you should have 2 of these, so you could either plant morning glories if you have some other seeds or want to try a pea or a zucchini. Feel free to do that. But the secret is to keep these damp. You'll see the seeds start to sprout. As it gets big and the frost date is correct, make sure and determine when the frost date is for the morning glory or whatever it is you have. Just go out to where you're going to plant it in the garden. You actually dig a small hole and drop this down in it without disturbing the plant. You put the egg carton and all down in there. This egg carton is disintegratable, which means it will disintegrate in the soil or will become compost. So that actually will add back to the soil, and it won't disturb the roots. So your plant shouldn't even miss a beat. It should just take off and grow. Many times when we plant actual plants that we have been grown from seed or that we buy at the greenhouse, what will happen is they will go into what they call shock. So when you plant them, they may be a day or 2 that they really don't look really good and they're not growing. This helps not have that happen. You keep this watered, you just drop it down in the dirt, the egg carton disintegrates, becomes part of the soil, and you don't have to disturb the root. So that's one thing you can do to reuse something. If you have paper egg cartons, instead of throwing those away or whatever, you can use those to plant seeds. another one, and I don't have, hold on just a second. You should have a baggie with tubes, cardboard tubes. Can you find your baggie with tubes in it? Okay, this is the same type of principle. You can actually, depending on your seed, these are tall. I just left them whole. You can either, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to go through both of them. You can clip the bottom of this and turn it in so it closes up the bottom. And you can do that as far up as you want. You then put soil in it. Again, put your seed, whatever you want. This one would be a good one for your pea, your zucchini. It's a good one for something that vines because there's more room. You don't have to put the soil clear up to the top. You can, kind of pack it down, put your seed in. Your seed will grow up out. Then again, this is cardboard. So what do you think is going to happen when you just go put it in the soil?
It will degrade and the plant will be able to grow free.
Yes, it will become part of the soil. And again, you don't have to disturb your roots. So your plant will grow much faster and much better. Another way to do this, and if you have more tubes, you can actually, I've seen people, they get a little pan, like a pie pan or a little cake pan, and they just stack these tubes in there, stick soil in all of them, pack it down, put their seeds, and then just keep them watered in that pan. That pan keeps the soil from coming out because your root will go down and hang on to that soil so it won't fall out. But then again, once your seeds get so tall and the frost state's correct for that type of seed, this is a good one to put some little tomato plants in. Cabbage, I've started cabbage in these and they work really, really well. For cabbage, since they're not real tall, I've actually cut these in half and made small seed starters and just planted a cabbage seed in each. And I had like a whole little 8x8 cake pan and kept them watered. And again, the cardboard will get damp, so make sure they're in something or some places the moisture's not going to bother. Kind of put them in a window or someplace warm and they will seed, and then you just go drop it, dig a little hole, drop this down in it, cover it up, and your plant's going to take off and grow. Okay, so that's one way to recycle, reuse things. There's other ways you can do that. I've actually taken newspapers and folded them into little pots. Newspaper does the same thing. It will grow your seed. Just take and drop it down in the dirt when you get ready to plant it out in the garden, dig a little hole, put that newspaper down in there, and it also becomes part of the soil and disintegrates. So different ways, a lot of fun. Last summer, I actually had a recycle, reuse planting session, and we did a whole day of just different things. Newspaper pulp. We took newspaper pulp, made our own newspaper pulp by shredding up newspaper, putting water in it in the blender. We took cookie cutters, pushed the newspaper pulp down in there, sprinkled ready seeds on it, and after it dried, it popped out. We just took that, take your cookie that we made on newspaper pulp out, put it in the garden, put just a little bit of soil on it, water. The reddish just all took off and grew. So some other things you can do that are really kind of cool. Okay, now we're going to look at the next handout, and there should be one that says Plan It Bigger. You see the one that says Plan It Bigger?
Yes.
Okay, on this one, we're going to look at the front part. We will look at the back part next time. But Plan It Bigger lets you kind of talk about, there's things, if you look down towards the bottom, and it talked about the planting calendar, the average last frost date, which we've already kind of covered, those kinds of things, the time required from planting each seed to transplanting it outdoors, and that's on this seed packet. We've looked at that. The harvest date from the time we grew the plant comes up to the time we harvest. But if you look, what I wanted this handout for is down towards the bottom. It talks about, I'm just going to read it. It talks about the vegetables to start from seeds inside your home. And it talks about tomatoes, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, eggplant, and peppers. Those are all things that you could start. You could use those tubes. You could use egg cartons. You could use other means. Lots of things you can start. But then it talks about vegetable plants that are actually easier to start out directly in the garden. And believe me, I've tried doing some of these from inside. They don't transplant well. If you start them inside and then put them outside, they just don't seem to do as well. So these are ones I always go directly to the garden for. The beans, your green beans actually work better. Any kind of bean actually works better out in the garden. Your carrots, your onions, potatoes. You can actually take a bag of potatoes, and have you ever had the potatoes start to grow a little thing just what I call sprouts, but the potato kind of starts getting something on it. Have you ever seen
Yes.
that? You can
Yeah.
actually cut those out and plant them. You cut those potatoes, kind of slice around what they call the eye or the sprout, put those in the dirt with that sprout heading up or the eye heading up, and it will actually grow a potato. It will actually grow a potato plant and have potatoes on it. In fact, I like the yellow potatoes, and I had some start to sprout, so I've got those in my, if it quits raining long enough and I can get back in my garden, I'm going to go ahead and plant some of those yellow potatoes and see what I can grow this year. So I actually have some potato bags coming, and I'm excited to see how those work. Spinach, Swiss chard, also a family of the spinach. I planted it. Corn, peas, beets, radishes, and Swiss chard. Now, something I want to talk about real quick, and I know my time's coming to an end. Where does it say this? Some seeds will say plant after all danger of frost is past. Others will say plant as early as the ground can be worked. Those that say plant as early as the ground can be worked are what they call cold weather plants, and we're going to talk about that next time. Warm weather versus cold weather plants. But radishes, it's going to be my classic example there, what they call a cold weather plant. So you can actually work ground, put those outside now, and even if it freezes, it will not bother them. They are what they call frost tolerant. Now, they're not frost proof. Obviously, it could freeze hard enough. If it got down to 0 again, it's going to kill those radishes. But if it just frost, which we're to the point it should just be a light frost, those radishes will not die. They will continue to grow. And actually, radishes are much tastier in the colder weather. When the hot weather hits, radishes start getting what I call hot. They actually get a heat to them. If you want really fresh tasting, cool, crispy radishes, the earlier you can get those out, the better. I actually planted our radishes before this last set of rain came through. I was able to get my garden. So we'll see if they come up. One thing is the germination takes longer when it's cold. They don't come up as quickly as they would if the ground was already really warm. Okay, let me see where we're at. Okay, for next time, we'll go over the rest of the handouts. We're going to talk about some other things. One thing I'd like to do is stop for a minute and ask you, have you learned anything today?
I learned about planting seeds and different kinds of plants. It was interesting.
Okay, and is that something you're going to be able to use this year?
Yeah, probably. We're thinking of starting a garden.
Okay, now keep in mind, you can do what they call container gardening, and I don't know, I may talk to Nolly about trying to do an actual container gardening session one day, because I think that's very important. But you can actually put, like your morning glory, you could put that out in a pot. It's going to grow and it's going to vine. I will tell you that. Your mom knows about morning glories already. But like your pea, you could plant a couple peas in your tubes and then put them in a bigger flower pot, a big pot outside, and those peas will continue to grow. Most plants, as long as you don't crowd them, can actually be planted in containers. They don't have to necessarily be out in actually a garden spot worked up in the ground, or a big raised bed that sometimes takes time. Sam, what's one thing you wish we'd have talked about or that we would have learned today?
Well, there was a big pot in here. So, what are we going to use this in the next session?
What is that again, Sam?
There was a big flower pot in the packet. Are we going to use that in the next session?
We are. We're going to talk about some container gardening a little bit and use that pot for that. So yes, we're going to use it next session. And we have a handout or two. Then I'll be sharing some more information next session as well.
And I really appreciate hearing that, you know, those old seeds, go ahead and try them, because I always wondered, okay, if it's past the year, is it just not even worth trying? So thank you for that. And also the whole recycling and reusing of materials. You know, we don't have to have the most beautiful pots. We've got stuff in our homes that we can use to start these seeds and even, you know, continue with the transplant. So thank you, Cindy.
Now there's actually a new, I don't want to call it a new fad because I think it's been around, but it's called bucket planting. You can look on the internet for 5-gallon bucket planting or just bucket planting, and they talk a lot about what you can do with just 5-gallon buckets, which are fairly reasonable. And another thing, if any of you know farmers with cattle, And I actually could probably kind of help with that. They have what they call big mineral tubs, which are, I don't know how many gallon they are. They're not real tall, they're big around. They make really good container gardens. And you can grow tomatoes, lettuce, you can grow just about a whole garden in one of those with just a few seeds of each thing, or get a couple of them. I think one of those will grow, I think 2 tomato plants, if I remember right, or maybe 3. It's out online. It talks about the tub container gardening and the bucket planting or bucket gardens. It's really kind of cool. They just kind of set 5-gallon buckets beside each other and have their whole garden like right beside their garage or whatever. So some different ways you can do different things. Okay, Sam, do you have any other questions?
So when would I plant these peas?
The peas, you can plant those at any time. They're actually a cold weather crop, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more next time. But peas, if you look at the back of your pea package, let me find mine. Full sun, early spring for first crop, late crop. You can actually plant peas. It says here, April. I actually put peas out in my garden, so we'll see if they work. Another thing that's interesting, the peas I gave you guys are what they call sugar snap. Do you know what sugar snap peas are?
Yeah, I like them. They're ones that you can eat the pods raw.
Very good, Sam. Yes, they're my favorite too. That's one reason I gave you guys sugar snap, because I really like them. You can actually let them get big and shell them like regular peas, so you just have the pea. But I like the pods, so I like the sugar pod peas. I will tell you they're sweeter the smaller the pea itself or the seed inside is. So keep that in mind. Okay, any other questions? Good question, Sam.
I put into the chat the
No more
link to the
questions.
gardening journal, and we'll get some more information from Cindy, and we'll make that available either in the chat next time, or also I can send it out to you. For example, the green bean starter instructions.
I'm going to provide journal links. I'll kind of look around. I'm also going to provide the links to the sites that we went to today. So if you want to review the seed packets and all that. So I will review those 3 sites. Actually, we went to 4, I think. But I will share that with you. And if nothing else, make it like a handout that we can email to you or something. I'll get that up to Anali.
Well, thank you
Also,
so
I'm going
much.
to type my email into chat if you have any questions about 4-H or this in general, or would like to come out to Extension and see what the Master Gardeners do, just contact me. I'll be glad to arrange with one of them, give you a kind of a tour of our high tunnel. They've got lots of stuff going on in there, lots of seeds, and they're very knowledgeable. So they'll be really good people to ask questions of.
I would enjoy that.
Okay, there's my email. Just email me. We'd have to set up an appointment to make sure we've got people here to do that, because they're not here all the time. But I'm sure they'd love to have you come out and look at things.
Thanks. Where is that at?
It's actually on the west side of Missouri Western's campus.
Okay.
And you know where the Kit Bond Incubator building is?
Yes.
Yes, we've seen it from the highway.
Okay, well, you go down Mitchell, and before you get to that, you're going to turn in front of it, and we are the second building on the left-hand side. It's a 1-story brick ranch style, just old building. We used to be, I believe, the conservation department years ago. It's an old building, but we're here, and there's a high tunnel behind us.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
What tunnel?
A high tunnel.
The high tunnels, it's kind of like a big greenhouse, Sam. It's plastic, and the sun comes in, it stays warm. They've got heaters and stuff in there. It's like a huge, tall hoop house, or it's rounded on top,
right.
and it's like a big, huge greenhouse.
Yeah, it sounds neat.
Okay, well, there's my email, so make sure and email, or we can talk next time too, and we'll get something set up.
All right, thank you.
Cindy, thank you so
Okay.
much. You've given us so much information and ideas already, and we look forward to the next time. So we'll see you in a couple days again,
Okay.
and we look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.